Coming up, the SEC takes a wild turn as suddenly LSU is on the rise and Auburn looks like a flop. We'll talk about it all next right here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new era of us for sorts here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. I'm still Brandon Adams, this is still the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson, but brand new digs for us as our studio evolves even further. And I got to tell you, I like the new look. I love the chance to hang out and talk a little SEC football. For me, it could not be more perfect than it's going to be here over the course of the next 60 minutes. Yeah, feeling kind of fancy here on this Monday and a lot of football obviously to get to, but we're doing some pretty nice new digs here. And of course, as we said, AT&T, always a proud sponsor of AT&T SEC Country Live. Make sure you switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV to stay connected all season long. And speaking of talking some SEC football, let's get ready to do that right now. Now, of course, coming up later on our show, we'll say hello to Mark Burnett, who covers the Alabama Crimson Tide for SECCountry.com. We'll do that less than 20 minutes from right now. Also, about 40 minutes after the hour, we'll talk to Alex Hickey, who covers the LSU Tigers. Before any of that, though, speaking of the LSU Tigers, let's make them the subject of item number one on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And
you are already getting it in the comment section, BA. Already getting it about those Auburn Tigers, so I can't wait to get on to that.
Yeah, so listen, I know I'm going to take a bunch of grief for that. So we'll let you give me everything you want to give me for what I've said about Auburn. We'll do all of that and talk about this, but let's at least give LSU a little bit of credit before y'all start beating up on me for picking Auburn. Auburn does have the 20-0 lead on Saturday, and it ends up being the big win for LSU. And I guess now maybe a chance to rethink Ed Orgeron a little bit?
I think so. I think you obviously had to give him a ton of credit for what they were able to pull off in back-to-back weekends, knocking off Florida and Auburn. And I think you have to point to Ed Orgeron. But really, for me, this was about Danny Etling, and this was about Matt Canada and this offense seemingly finally coming together. We've had a ton of questions. I don't know whether to give more credit to LSU or kind of rag on Auburn. I think they both split sides in terms of the way you saw this game. But Ed Orgeron deserves credit in these circumstances. Obviously, he's kind of had a turnaround there at LSU, and I think he's feeling a lot better, and those fans are feeling a lot better.
Yeah, for me, obviously the criticism of Auburn's coming throughout the show, but the thing that you say about LSU off the top here, the thing that you got to give them credit for, is the fact that in the second half of this game, this looked like LSU on brand. The reputation that's developed over so many years about being able to kind of go out there and really shut teams down defensively, this team was able to do that again on Saturday. They look like the LSU teams in the past. And that's the thing, if you're a Tigers fan, an LSU Tigers fan, you're most comforted by is this LSU team felt like LSU again, really just stifling defense against Auburn in the second half.
Yeah, absolutely. When you talk about the downfield game, and I have a lot of questions about the play calling, and we'll get into that as the show goes on. I didn't like the way Jarrett Stidham attacked this defense. I didn't like the way that Chip Lindsey had his play calling. I felt like there was a lack of intermediate routes. We kind of went back to the Auburn offense that we saw against Clemson earlier in the year. LSU's defensive pass rush was able to create a lot of havoc for Jarrett Stidham, and they didn't really have any answers on the offensive side of the ball. And in turn, Danny Etling, good. I mean, he was not a game manager. He was a guy that went out there and won this football game for LSU.
All right, let me see if I can get a bunch of these comments in. Esteban Estevez says, "Hey, BA, you still riding high on Auburn? Ha, 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 ha." And he gives us a Go Tigers spelled G-E-A-U-X. Listen, if you're an LSU fan, you've got every right to mock me for that today. If you're an Alabama fan, I've been all over Auburn in comparison to Alabama, thinking Auburn was going to win the SEC West. I'm still not quite done with Auburn yet as a formidable team, but clearly after a second regular season loss in a game I didn't think they'd lose to LSU, pretty clearly Auburn is not as good right now as I thought they would be before the start of the season, so you've got every right to kind of criticize me for that. No question.
Listen, I'm sad about myself because I backed off. The thing I'd been talking about all offseason was that Gus Malzahn's good for a couple of these losses every year. I mean, and I picked Clemson, LSU, Alabama, and Georgia to beat Auburn this year, and I backed off of it last week. You had me believing, BA. You backed me off of my prediction that I had all offseason, and I went ahead and gave this win to Auburn last week on the show. And credit to, like I said, credit to Ed Orgeron, credit to Danny Etling, credit to LSU for being able to turn things around. And early on in the game, it didn't look like they'd be able to. 20-0, Auburn was up there early on in the second quarter. I saw a stat today dating back to 2014. Top 10 teams were 182-0. When they were up by 20 points.
And this crazy. Was the first time. Against unranked teams. That's
number 183. And so I think that's really that's the talking point when we talk about this game. It's not only LSU's ability to come back, it's the collapse of this Auburn offense.
And listen, y'all beat up on Cliff Nelson's comment section every day. Shannon Burgess takes a bunch of heat in this comment section. These LSU fans are riding high today. I saw Cliff a moment ago saying there's only one real Tiger in the SEC. And after you beat Florida on the road last week, and you beat Auburn, every game since 1999 in Death Valley. That streak stays alive. Those are the kinds of things you get to say on a day like this.
Yeah, Cliff Nelson just Conor McGregor into the comment section, feeling really good about himself. Man, I knew he'd be feeling good on a day like today.
Shannon Burgess also says that Coach O managed the game well, made some good calls. I know a lot of LSU fans are going to feel like that's true today.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I had some questions early on of the way Dave Aranda was using Arden Key in the 3 technique position. I thought that left a lot to be desired. Obviously, when you have an elite pass rusher like that, why not put him out on the edge? Why are you going against Braden Smith at the 3 technique position on 1st and 10? But they corrected some things. They made a lot of adjustments at halftime and really shut down Auburn's offense throughout the second half. I thought that Auburn and Chip Lindsey and Gus Malzahn didn't have any answers really in the second half, and an opportunistic defense from LSU.
And by the way, for those of you who are not Auburn or LSU fans, the one thing you can never say is that we want to come on this show and be negative. I'm trying to start the show by talking about what a good day it was for LSU. I'm trying to give them their due, but in the comment section, all anybody wants to do is rag on Auburn. So you know what? For all of you who've been waiting to either sort of criticize me for what I've said about Auburn or just criticize Auburn because you don't like them, let's do item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list, and we can start ripping on Auburn here, because pretty clearly it was not a good day for the other Tigers in this game.
I have so many questions when they attack like this. The running game is so good from Auburn, and some of the things they do up front are so good. Obviously, they had some offensive line issues. They had some injuries. Casey Dunn goes down, and you have to slide Austin Golson around at 3 different positions there in the first half of the game. So I know that Gus Malzahn had to take that into a factor in terms of what they were going to do play calling wise, but when I see this offense, I see running game that you can get there with Kerryon Johnson, you can rack up yards, but I see no intermediate passing. And Jarrett Stidham is chunking the ball 40 and 50 yards downfield, hoping one of his wide receivers can't make a play. And when they don't, this is what the game looks like for them. When LSU's DBs can go up man-to-man and guard this wide receiver core from Auburn, they had no answers in the late in that game.
I mean, people are coming in hot here. Brandon Stabler says Auburn's going to have one more win. That's the Louisiana Monroe in a few weeks. Gus has to go. Jason Hughes says Gus needs to realize this is college, not high school, obviously referencing back to his time working as a high school coach in Arkansas. Jay Statham says, so does this mean the Auburn Love Fest is finally over? Thank you, he says. But how about those other points about, laying this loss, directly at the feet of Gus Malzahn and pointing out that Malzahn has kind of gone from being a coach that might be building a championship team, a guy that I really gave a lot of credit to here on the show for the work that he was doing with the Auburn program this season, to now being a guy saying offense didn't show up again in the second half when it needed to, and that's what Malzahn's calling card as a former play caller, but now as a more CEO-style head coach. I mean, are we really ready to go all in with both feet on the Malzahn criticism after this game?
I'm not. I still think they have a good team. I think that 8-4, 9-3 is going to be a good season for them. Whether or not they beat Alabama or beat Georgia or either one at the end of the year, I think is going to be a staple to how you end up feeling at the end of the year about this team. But it's like I said going into the year, Gus Malzahn's just good for a couple of these games, seemingly cannot get over the hump against some of these teams, and it happens every year that they lose a game they probably shouldn't have. And I think that begs the question, is he the right guy for this job long term? I think he is. I think he's a good coach. I think that their offensive line had some issues going into this game, had been ironing those out since Clemson, but they started to rear their ugly head again this week.
Joel Anthony Dean says Auburn tried to force it deep every play in the second half. I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, I have talked up Jarrett Stidham. Where was Stidham in the second half of this game, especially that final drive? Got a chance to watch that one from the press box there in Athens. I did not think Jarrett Stidham looked like the quarterback I expected him to look like midway through October. No. I thought he'd be, really one of the leaders in the SEC in terms of throwing the football. This was a no-show for Stidham for the most part. One of the games his team needs more than any other.
One of the more shocking outcomes as far as quarterback play goes that I can remember seeing in a long time. And I've been on the Etling bandwagon. I've been saying Danny Etling's the guy for this LSU team. You've been kind of on Jarrett Stidham's side. But if you'd have told me even last week that Danny Etling would seemingly outplay Jarrett Stidham, I'd have laughed at you. I think everybody would have. And yet, Danny Etling comes out and shows the gamesmanship and is able to do the things to lead his team to victory. It wasn't always pretty, but he put the ball where it needed to go. Jarrett Stidham not able to do that. I thought some of the throws he had looked absolutely ugly, sometimes not even giving his receiver core an opportunity to make a play.
Yeah, I'll be the first to tell you, man, I hope people appreciate this, that, I'm giving, opinions on this show every single day, but I also am going to be the first to tell you when one of these goes wrong. And for me, something I was wrong about on two fronts, both Stidham compared to Danny Etling. I thought that Danny Etling would be replaced by this point in the season. I thought that Miles Brennan would be the quarterback for LSU. The fact of the matter is Etling statistically is having a much better year than I thought he would, and this is the kind of game where I thought that Stidham would give Auburn a real advantage, and it just did not happen. And, I agree with you. I think Auburn could still be fine. They may, win every game but Alabama and go 9-3 at that point in time. You're talking about really a pretty good year. And actually, from a record standpoint, an even better year than they had a year ago. But for a lot of Auburn fans, you got to admit that's probably not going to be good enough.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you start to question the games moving forward. Are they going to be able to beat Texas A&M team who got a big win this last week? Obviously, Georgia and Alabama are going to come later in the year. I think the biggest problems for Auburn this year will continue to be teams that can go man-to-man with their young receiver core and rush the passer. You saw it against Clemson. You saw it against LSU. They're going to see that later on in the year. I don't know so much about Texas A&M, but at least against Georgia and Alabama there in November. And I feel like everything's still out front for Auburn. Obviously, they've got an opportunity to still make some noise in the SEC. Some things need to fall their way, but this is a good football team. They're well-rounded. They're still good up front offensively. They've still got a great defense under Kevin Steele, and I think they'll still make some noise later.
But one of the things that gives you an idea of the problems that Gus Malzahn might have, Heath Evans, a former Auburn player, kind of goes on Twitter essentially throwing his resume out there, suggesting that he wants to be the Auburn coach. We'll show you some of the screen grab of kind of what he put online here. I mean, this to me is a total embarrassment of basically using his notes app to kind of run through all the reasons and all the things that he thinks he's going to be able to do to be the Auburn coach. It's just, I think this is an embarrassment for Heath Evans. This doesn't make Gus Malzahn look bad. This makes Heath Evans look bad here. This is sort of the kind of unhinged missive of someone with way too much time on his hand, not someone who wants to be taken seriously. You want to be a football coach? How about you get in the ringer and you do the work and kind of work your way up the ladder? Don't throw your resume out there and your plan of action on Twitter and expect somebody to say, well, let's give Heath Evans an interview for the head coaching job at Auburn. He got to be embarrassed by even putting that out there.
He is, and did you notice how he spelled hire? I would hire the best. There's so many things I have wrong with this, especially, I agree with you. I think it's a bad look for Heath Evans. He says at the end, how many other guys out there would have recommendations from 2 Super Bowl winning coaches? I got news for you. If those coaches are writing you a recommendation to be the head coach at Auburn right now, the recommendation doesn't mean anything at all. Right. I mean, it means nothing at all. I don't know what this was. This is the second loss of the year from Auburn. And Heath Evans is over here acting like the program's about to burn down.
And the other thing is ex-coaches or coaches by their ex-players will say they'll recommend those guys for anything.
Yeah,
there's never been a coach not say a bad word about one of his ex-players. The idea that, hey, the coaches I played for will say good things about me. Well, what coach doesn't say stuff like that?
My first thought when I read that was, it's no slam dunk that Bill Belichick's going to write you a recommendation. Bill Belichick obviously loves his ex-players, but I think he knows better than to write a recommendation for somebody that's never been a coach to all of a sudden be the head coach at Auburn.
It's one thing to vouch for somebody as being a good guy. It's another thing to recommend him to be the head coach at Auburn. It's an embarrassment.
I agree with you, and I kind of thought this would be kind of a funny thing. Obviously he's having a good time without.
Yeah.
He was serious though. I think like he was dead serious on all his talking points and all the reasons he would be a good head coach. And I understand that he's kind of just joking around with it, but I thought it was a terrible.
Well, here's what's serious about it for me is that a guy like Evans does not put this out there unless he thinks there's some sort of demand out there for a different coach at Auburn. You don't put that out there unless you think some people want to hear about it, which does speak to a potential problem for Malzahn in that, like a lot of SEC coaches, you're only one loss away, and I'll call this a bad loss. Auburn was up 20-0. You're only one bad loss away from kind of bringing some of this stuff back to bear again.
Yeah, it's tough. And obviously, when I read the bottom of the tweet and read people talking back to Heath Evans, I think he felt like his standing with the Auburn fan base would go over a little bit better than it did, but people basically laughing at him for his comments there. But you're right, it goes back to Gus Malzahn and how this can change week in and week out. We were talking about, how is LSU going to get out of this Orgeron contract a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden they fire off victories to 2 of their biggest rivals in Florida and Auburn in back-to-back weeks. Now, by no means did they, beat the tar out of both those teams, but 2 victories back-to-back weeks, and obviously at Orgeron now on more stable footing.
All right, Tim Russell, Chad Eason both have pretty interesting comments. Let me bring these comments into our discussion, then we'll get ready to move on, talk some Alabama here. Tim says, it is what it is. It's college football's crazy this year. Crazy teams getting beat by teams that they shouldn't get beat. Welcome to the SEC. That's what he says.
It's not just the SEC either.
Yeah, and Chad Eason also says the same thing. Basically saying that a lot of these results, anything can happen, and there is an element of this in play that it's a surprising result, but it's been a weekend of surprising results and really a season of surprising results to kind of go back through the last few weeks.
And I've got to give you a ton of credit. I mean, I came in here last week talking to BA about how this schedule this weekend was kind of a snooze fest, not a lot of big matchups, and BA looked at me and said, "Listen, look how many of these top 10 teams are going on the road to play these teams, and we saw them fall like dominoes this weekend."
That's absolutely right. That's Mike Johnson. My name's Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live, AT&T AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T Entertainment your way. Make sure you switch to AT&T Wireless, also to DirecTV, and you can stay connected all season long. Coming up in about 5 minutes, we'll talk to Mark Burnett here on our program. He covers the Alabama Crimson Tide for SECCountry.com. Before we get to that, let's talk about Mark Burnett and Alabama's win against Arkansas on Saturday. And I guess one of the topics of conversation that comes out of that game, because of another big performance by Alabama running back Damien Harris, is the possibility that Harris could be a Heisman contender. Mark Burnett wrote about that at SECCountry.com. From Mark's perspective, there are just a couple things potentially standing in the way of Harris, and Mark wrote about those. We'll show you this quote here online on the screen. He says his biggest problem, he plays Alabama, individual success, not always kind of awarded there because the team success overshadows everything else. Also, he's in a backfield that's got Bo Scarborough, Josh Jacobs, Najee Harris, Jalen Hurts, also putting up some big numbers. But neither of those things are Harris's fault, says Mark Burnett of SEC Country. The last thing is definitely true. Harris's individual performance shouldn't be overshadowed by his teammates, nor by the fact that Alabama as a team is so dominant every year, but does that equate to being a Heisman contender in your mind?
I think it should, and we talked about Nick Chubb in the same talking point last week where I didn't feel like he was getting enough love because we spent so much time talking about Jake Fromm and Jacob Eason. And neither one of those guys was really the leader of the team. It goes back to Nick Chubb in this ground game. And I feel like Damien Harris is in sort of a similar spot. Now, obviously, that hype train, I think this is the first week you can really bring it up because this is the first week throughout the year rushing for 125 yards this weekend. He's actually the leading rusher for Alabama. It's been Jalen Hurts. Yeah. Been Jalen Hurts throughout the year, and now he pulls away from Jalen Hurts and gets more yards than him. I think he's got to be up there. I think he's the third leading rusher in the SEC right now behind Nick Chubb and a couple of other guys. So I think that this Heisman steam will start to pick up because the big runs keep coming, and he's shown the speed that he didn't have last year. Yeah. The speed to be able to pull off on some of these runs and get these 75 and 80-yard games.
Somebody asked a question a minute ago, Joel Anthony Dean, in the comment section, basically saying, yeah, but is Damien Harris even the best running back on his team? Is it Bo Scarborough who's the best running back? Maybe it's all said and done, Najee Harris has the best career. I'm not quite sure that matters, though. Right now, Harris, the guy who's had the better performances. Last year, Scarborough had the better performances down the stretch. They're both potential Heisman candidates. It just so happens that maybe this is the year where Damien Harris is either getting more of an opportunity to let that shine or making the most of his opportunity. But right now, Harris is the guy who's in the spotlight, whereas last year and maybe coming into this year, we thought it would be Scarborough.
Well, for my money, it's always been Damien Harris because I think he has that ability to move laterally and then also accelerate through the hole once he gets there. I think Bo Scarborough, obviously, for all the things he does well, and he has a high rate of speed once he gets going. He's one of those guys that you love to put outside on some of these speed sweeps, let him get 1 foot in the ground and get up kind of outside the numbers out there. Damien Harris, for me, running inside, being able to make these cuts, and then accelerating through the hole, and now this year adding a new element to his game, being able to pull away from some of those guys. In the secondary, I think he's as dangerous as there is. I'm not going to sit here and compare him to other running backs in the SEC or in the country, but I think he's as dangerous as you'll find.
Terrence Collins says, is he the best player on his team? And Terrence, I think that's a great question. For my money, the answer to that question is no. I mean, that's not a slight at Damien Harris, but the best player on this team is Minkah Fitzpatrick. If I had a Heisman vote, and if you feel like you've got to include an Alabama guy in that discussion because Alabama's winning so much, best player on that team's got to get some consideration, I'm giving a Heisman vote to Minkah Fitzpatrick more so than Damien Harris. Not a slight at Harris, but where would Alabama be without Minkah Fitzpatrick? That's the individual name that the Crimson Tide can do least without.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think that there's some merit to what you're saying definitely about Minkah. I would argue that Minkah's numbers probably aren't what you expected him to be this year, although he's been locked down and a lot of people haven't looked his way. That's the reason his numbers kind of falter. But Damien Harris, when you look for me offensively, I definitely think he's the MVP so far. You can point to Jalen, you can point to some of the rushing yards he's had, but for my money, I'm telling you, Damien Harris and his ability to accelerate has been what really has separated this team in the last few weeks.
By the way, in the comment section, Jason Scroggs saying it's that no honey bun diet that's paying off for Damien Harris. You may be right about that. It's something else that was true about Damien Harris. After the game, he was interviewed by reporters. That's just like every other game. But in this particular game, one of the inquisitors, a slightly different person, watch as Alabama quarterback Jalen Hurts slides over and starts asking his own question to Damien Harris, and the two have a little bit of a funny exchange. Take a look at this.
Spectacular run.
Yeah. I actually already answered that question. Would you like for me to answer again?
But I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Me.
You. What happened was we were trying to get the edge on the outside zone play, and the entire defense just kind of flew across the field. And we knew going into this game with our game plan, we knew if they overran the play that we'd be able to cut back and have an explosive play. So I think that's kind of what happened.
How was the quarterback on that play?
Quarterback? He did a great job handing off the ball.
Thanks, Damien.
Kind of a funny line there at the end. He's asked how the quarterback do on the play, and he says he did a good job handing off the football. And this goes back to what you and I talked about on Thursday, that a loose Alabama is a dangerous Alabama.
Yeah.
Nick Saban loosening up a little bit. Seems like there's some evidence of that here lately. That makes Alabama dangerous. The fact that Damien Harris and Jalen Hurts are kind of having some fun with each other in the locker room post-game, it just speaks to a team that's feeling very confident in itself, really sure of itself when it comes to its process, and bad news for the other teams potentially on Alabama's schedule, including Tennessee this Saturday.
I have to agree with you. I think this also points to Jalen Hurts being confident in where his standing is with the team. I mean, so many of the talking points throughout the offseason, Jalen Hurts, downfield passing, what are you going to get? Is he just a running quarterback, or is he going to be able to throw the ball downfield? I thought he made some good throws in this game. His numbers didn't come out to be as lopsided as I kind of expected them throughout the first quarter, but I think they definitely started to get there with some of their crossing routes. I think he got actually to 8 different receivers, which you haven't seen Jalen Hurts do this year. And it kind of goes on in this video talking about it in our talking points. He seems comfortable. He seems very comfortable with the media. He seems very comfortable with his positioning on this team, and I think this clip kind of shows it.
Absolutely. All right, do we have Mark Burnett ready to go here? We'll get Mark Burnett coming up in just a moment. We'll talk some Alabama football with him. Before that, I guess let me squeeze in something else that happened in Alabama on Saturday. It's item number 4 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. The homecoming of sorts, not just at Tuscaloosa for Dabo Swinney, but also Les Miles in Baton Rouge there as well. Let me show you Dabo Swinney here first, getting a chance to hug Gene Stallings, his coach from the 1992 National Championship team. You see a big smile on Swinney's face. I don't know if that's fake or not, given the fact that Swinney lost the game on Friday night to Syracuse. Clearly, he had a little heavy heart moving into Tuscaloosa on Saturday, but appeared to be having a good time. He was also at the homecoming for Les Miles in Baton Rouge on Saturday for the honoring of the 2007 national champions there in Baton Rouge. We'll show you Les Miles there in Baton Rouge as well. The quote from him saying it was great to be back in Tiger Stadium. Pleased the way the 2000 championship team was received. Great group of men. I think we have a picture for Les here as well in Baton Rouge. So which of these two homecomings impressed you the most? I know you were there for the Dabo Swinney one. Which of these two homecomings kind of worked out the best?
I think it's definitely Les Miles. I mean, Dabo is in such a tough spot. You would think playing Syracuse on a Friday night, Clemson, be able to go get the victory, and Dabo be able to come back to Tuscaloosa with open arms. He got a great ovation. Obviously, you know, a very classy guy. A lot of people from Alabama really embrace him, but it's got to be Les Miles in my opinion. I mean, this guy goes down there. LSU gets a win that nobody thought they would get against Auburn, and at halftime, his team is cheered. I mean, and his guys huddle around him. He's holding up the crystal BCS ball. He's getting to taste some grass on CBS, and I thought it worked out great for him. It was very classy the way LSU did this.
Let me bring in Mark Burnett here on this discussion here. And Mark, you were in Tuscaloosa. I'm sure you saw Dabo Swinney, and it had to be hard for him knowing that he was in that building after having lost to Syracuse, a game that really helped Alabama. And as much as he appreciates his alma mater, a lot of Tide fans would like to see him one day maybe be the coach there in Tuscaloosa. He's a competitor right now, and he certainly did not live up to his end of the competitive bargain as far as that rematch goes by losing that game on Friday night, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people were upset that Clemson lost that game, but I mean, just seeing Dabo on the sideline, you know, he looked to be in good spirits. I think it was great, you know, for him to see Gene Stallings and see some of his teammates that he probably hadn't seen in a few years. But yeah, I mean, all in all, definitely a bad loss. I mean, it's one of those situations where you know, a lot of people were comparing him to Nick Saban and comparing their programs to Alabama. And I think that goes to show you the difference there. Alabama's won 71 straight games against unranked opponents, and they don't drop games they're not supposed to, and that's what Clemson did on Friday night.
A moment ago, we talked about your column about Damien Harris and his potential of being a Heisman contender, and what I said was, if I had a Heisman vote, and I don't, but if I did, the Alabama player I would most consider right now would be the defensive star, Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think Alabama could do without him less than really any name on offense. I mean, how about that in terms of Fitzpatrick getting some love on the defensive side of the ball, or is this one of those things where Harris will eventually rise and really be in contention for this award by the end of November?
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you on the Minkah thing. I think Minkah is definitely, you know, one of the top 2 most important players, top 3 most important players on the entire team, just considering what he does for the entire defense and that team from a leadership standpoint. But yeah, I just think Minkah is a really good player. But I think Damien needs some love too. I think it's a situation where he's averaging an insane amount of yards per carry, making the most of every single opportunity, getting his work done early. You see some of these guys out here in the country running the ball 20 to 25 times, but Damien doesn't have to do that. He's just still, you know, getting it done with with 9, 10, 12 carries a game and averaging, in SEC plays, averaging 11 yards a carry. I mean, think about that. That's more than the first down against SEC teams. This guy is putting on an incredible show, back-to-back weeks with 75-yard runs to open the games. And I heard you guys talking before I came on, and somebody was saying that Bo Scarborough was probably the better running back. I think the coaching staff is showing people who the best running back on this team is by starting Harris and giving him the lion's share of the touches. And he's a guy who does every single thing on the field. I mean, he blocks well, catches the ball out of the backfield. He's the most complete running back Alabama has.
I think it's a great statement, Mark. That's really interesting insight. Let me take a break from talking about the Arkansas game and look ahead to the Tennessee game here for a moment, and specifically this. I know you hear from a lot of Tennessee fans each and every week. Tell me their perspective on this rivalry right now. I'm old enough to have grown up with the third Saturday in October being one of those hallowed days in the college football calendar, and I'm not an Alabama fan or a Tennessee fan. But for the Alabama fans who now see their program so dominant over the Vols that I guess the line opened about a 34-point number, about a 34-point favorite, Alabama over Tennessee. What's the reaction to Tide fans about the fact that this rivalry has almost essentially dissolved into being nothing?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a mixed bag here. I think all Alabama fans understand that this is a big rivalry in the history of the program and history of the two programs, but it's been lopsided, since Nick Saban's been here. And Nick Saban was asked, whether or not a rivalry can still be a rivalry if it's not competitive. And he was, he had to sort of reach deep to even think of games that have been competitive in this. I mean, he went all the way back to 2009 when Alabama needed a blocked field goal to win that game.
You're talking about the game that Mike almost squandered. Mark, is that what you're going to do? You're going to go back to Mike's team?
Unbelievable, man.
Mike almost, his team almost gave it away versus Tennessee, got saved by Mount Cody. Is that what we're going to talk about here?
Terrible.
Well, it's funny because we were talking about that after the press conference, and we're like, man, why was Tennessee even so close in that game? Maybe Mike can give us the backstory.
Yeah, Mike, you want to come clean here?
It was.
Let's grill you like you grill some of these teams now.
I got to tell the truth. It was Lane Kiffin's play calling ability on the Tennessee sideline that day. I'm completely kidding. I don't. It was a tough game for us. So yeah, I don't even like to talk about it. It was so tough.
Good for you, Mark. Every now and then we got to keep this guy honest here a little bit.
No, yeah, but going back to what Nick Saban said, I think he really had to dig deep to even find games, against Tennessee throughout his tenure that have even been competitive. I mean, that 2009 game and then the 2015 game where Tennessee made a late rally and Alabama had to close it out with a sack fumble late in that game. Those have really been the only two games that have been pretty competitive in this rivalry. And then you think Nick Saban's been here 11 years now, and you see that 34-point line, which is the biggest line in the history of the rivalry, and you don't see it getting any better or getting any more competitive. And Nick Saban was kind of talking up Butch Jones, and I get that. He's not going to ever disrespect an opponent. He's always going to want the fans and the players to respect every single opponent. But at the same time, and we see with our own eyes, and we see how bad Tennessee looks right now.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the 34-point line because this is kind of how I approach games like this. I try to see, what's Bama going to do good, what's Tennessee going to do good, and I find myself asking this question to myself week after week. What's Bama's weakness? I think that they have some things that hit or miss. Obviously, catching punts was a big thing this past weekend. But in your opinion, what is the downside of Bama right now? What position group or what part of their team do you think is a weakness for them?
I think the offense is still inconsistent in a few areas. I don't think they can necessarily run the ball when they want to in terms of just coming out, okay, we need 4 or 5 yards, let's go get it. They can make the big explosive plays, but they haven't been able to consistently move the ball in the run game. The pass protection was a little shaky at times against Arkansas. And then also the play calling. It took a while for Brian Dable to adjust to what Arkansas was doing. They were throwing a lot of blitzes at Jalen Hurts, and Alabama wasn't able to pick them up. And it took him a while to adjust and go to some of the quick screen game. He eventually did that, and things were better. But I just think the offensive line probably still needs to show a little bit more consistency for Alabama to be sort of that dominant team as you get into December and potentially a playoff run.
All right, Mark, thanks so much for your time here today on AT&T SEC Country Live. We'll look forward to catching up with you again soon. Look forward to more of your coverage this week at SECCountry.com, and get ready for the Vols on Saturday. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, guys.
Good stuff there from Mark Burnett of AT&T's SEC Country Live. By the way, speaking of Tennessee, let's make them the subject of item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. A loss to South Carolina on Saturday. The Vols offense anemic, especially when it got down near the goal line, essentially losing yardage of total for the game down near red zone scoring territory. And Butch Jones today, when looking back on that game, kind of reflecting back on why it didn't get done against South Carolina, provided us another classic sort of Butchism here. We'll show you the quote from Butch Jones, who said, "We did everything to win the South Carolina game except score touchdowns." Is that the line from Butch Jones? Come on, Coach. Is that really what you want to say? No. I mean, can't you think of a better way to kind of summarize this? And in a way, I kind of get what he's saying, that, hey, we moved the football, we played hard, we just didn't get it across the end zone.
Yeah.
There's a way to say it, but once again, that's sort of not the way to say it.
Yeah, it's not the way to say it, and I completely agree with you. I mean, they can rack up yardage, they can play good defense, they didn't get in the end zone. And I think, that's the problem with a lot of the things Butch says, is it's like, hey, Butch, that's really obvious. You don't have to say all the obvious things. I keep waiting on Butch Jones to kind of light the match and throw it behind him, because he knows he's going down.
Oh, yeah,
Like, I'm waiting on this presser to come out with Butch Jones, is just like, okay, let me tell you what I've really thought of the last 5 years, and tell you what's been the problem with this team. But, from a lot of the Tennessee fans I talked to, they actually did feel a little bit better about this loss than I thought they would. And I think a lot of fans point to Jerry Garantano bringing a little bit of fire to this offense and being able to move the ball at times. But I don't think there's any good way to spin this. What Butch Jones is trying to do here is spin it in a good way.
Dedrick Frazier says, with a bunch of laughing emojis, "Oh, Butch." John Rosado says that Butch is butching his career right now. And I'm a big believer, and I'll give you credit for this. I'm talking about many months ago, before the start of the season, you predicted that Butch Jones would be fired during the season, which was actually a pretty bold thing to say. Now, it hasn't happened yet, so you may not be right, but during the offseason, it was a pretty bold thing to say. I think it's becoming more and more likely that you will be right on that. I believe that the only reason why Butch Jones did not get fired over the weekend, I don't think you want to put an interim coach on the field against Alabama. That's unfair to any interim coach, even though you're not going to consider that interim as your own replacement for Jones. You just don't want to put that guy in that spot. That's not fair. Other than that, I think you'd have a different coach in Tennessee this week.
I completely agree with you. I fully expect it to come Monday, and you're right. I had pointed to that week 7, that third Saturday in October against Alabama, where I thought that would be the breaking point for Tennessee in that program. Somebody brought it up to me this past week, and I think it's actually a pretty good point. There might have been 4 coaches in that stadium that were better than Butch Jones on Saturday.
Wow.
We talk about Tommy Tuberville in the booth. Philip Fulmer was on the sideline. Will Muschamp, Jon Gruden was in the stands for the game. There's a lot of different options out there, and right now Butch Jones just isn't that guy. And it's, to me, it's the tenacity that his teams have played with, and everything that he lost last weekend. His teams just haven't played with a ton of fight, in my opinion. It's like John Kelly. He talks about just getting the dub a couple of weeks ago, and we feel good about it. Sometimes that's just not good enough, and I think Butch Jones' teams have been just okay with trying to win right now.
By the way, we'll get back to the Tennessee discussion in a moment. Brian Murphy in the comment section said he liked the new studio. Let me kind of reset where we are on that. We talked about this before we kind of got going today. Yeah, we've obviously evolved here in AT&T's SEC Country Live a lot over the last few months. We first started doing the show, we were essentially doing it from like a closet, right? We would kind of design it and sort of set it up to make it seem like a real show, but we were doing this thing in a very, very small spot. We had no idea how long we'd be around, how much we'd be able to do this, but here we are now in a very real live studio, doing a real live show every day. And we first started during the football season. We had a little bit more of a traditional look, but this has always been the way that we do our thing, right? We're always casual, loose, and that's kind of what we wanted to establish and set up here, and it's been kind of nice to bring that.
I agree, and obviously thanks to everybody in the comment section has been the reason we continue to be able to do these shows, and you guys have been so good. I mean, I laugh. I sit here and laugh after shows and go back through some of the comments. Some of you guys are absolutely classic.
No, come on. Look, we're a show that keeps it real. You can tell people why you're really laughing.
Why?
Because my earpiece has not stayed in for 5 seconds during the entire show.
I knew
so here we are with
happen.
this brand new show, brand new studio, and everything's been great. And all of a sudden, my earpiece won't stay in today. So listen, it can never be all perfect, but we still have fun.
It's a work in progress, man.
By the way, I appreciate all the people laughing at me from the earpiece popping out. First of all, I have these gigantic ears. It's easy to see when it pops out. I don't know why it's such a problem all of a sudden today, but I'm glad y'all are having fun with that because it's been nothing but annoying to me. You did mention Jarrett Garantano a minute ago. Let me talk about him for item number 6 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list, because our Hale McGranahan, our colleague from SECCountry.com, caught a really interesting piece of video after the game. Of course, Tennessee has the ball down near the goal line, chance to score and win the game, cannot put the ball into the end zone, cannot cross, and Garantano was really just crestfallen about that, to the point that he was sitting on the ground and really inconsolable, but nonetheless, South Carolina quarterback Jake Bentley goes over to console him. Instead of me telling you about it, how about you watch the video here, because it got a lot of attention over the weekend. So you see here the celebration. There's Bentley running over to talk to Garantano, sticks out the hand for the handshake. Garantano does not want to give it to him. Then one of the linemen, or I guess that's probably more like a tight end, walks over to help him off the field. Bentley still, he's going to shake somebody's hand. This video traveled the globe. It was, I would say, it was the most viral video from college football this weekend.
Yeah.
Is it that big of a deal? And I'm not like downing Bentley here. What he did was a nice thing, but people acted like this was like the Restore Your Faith in Humanity video. Was it that big of a deal?
I don't know. I don't know it was that big a deal to the point where I don't think this happens much, but I don't think a lot of people get to kind of see these moments a lot of times. I mean, you saw Dabo Swinney Friday night go into the Syracuse locker room and actually was taking pictures with players over there and congratulating them on the big victory against Clemson. And that was kind of a lot of people thought that was a bad look. This is not a bad look. This is two very good quarterbacks with two very good futures, and I thought it was excellent. I really did. Going over there to help them up. This wasn't, hey man, let's grab hands and then I'll give you the one-handed hug. This is like the two-handed hug. Like he went in like you hug your grandma and gave him a two-handed hug. I thought it was a great look. I don't know that it should have gone viral, but I thought it was a good look, and it probably went viral because people don't get to see this a lot.
John Rosado says Bentley's an awesome player. Major props. He is an awesome player. I'm not doing the opposite of giving him props. I just feel like the players shake each other's hand all the time, and quarterbacks shake quarterbacks' hands. If anything, the thing about the video that sticks out to me is, what is Garantano doing lying on the ground? I want to say, Jarrett, you didn't lose the Super Bowl on the final play. You lost to average as grit South Carolina in a game you didn't even score a touchdown.
See, you can't do that, B.A.
No, I'm serious.
This is the Super Bowl for him, and this is his first career start at Tennessee, a program that he probably took that snap to lead off the game and thought, you know what, I can save Butch Jones' job. I can save this program. Didn't get it done and had an opportunity to and missed the throw.
I'm not being a jerk here. I really feel like I'm right about this. That is not a guy who left it on the field. That's a guy who's pouting.
How are you trying to spin that? You're trying to spin it like Butch Jones.
Show me this video one more time. This is not a guy who left it all on the field and bled for his team. I'm not saying he didn't. I'm saying this is a guy who pouted. This is a guy who felt like I waited for my turn and it didn't end up better than this. That's not good body language right there.
No, listen. And by the way, he's been sitting there for a while because South Carolina's whole team's almost off the field at this point right there. And I think that tells the story. Listen,
I don't want my quarterback doing that.
I'm never going to knock a guy that's showing emotion because I think that's what Tennessee has lacked for the most part during Jones's tenure there. And so I like the fact that the guy laid it on the line, wore it on his sleeve, and said, you know what, I didn't get the job done. I didn't do what I thought I'd do today, and I'm going to sit on the field and pout about it. That's fine with me. 24-hour rule.
A lot of comments. Well, he's going to sit there for 24 hours?
Yeah, if he wants to, that's fine with me.
John Rosado says this was his Super Bowl BA in Knoxville, where for South Carolina that may be the case.
Thank you, John.
Jeremy Pettis says the Vols quarterback was on the ground crying. He gives the laughing emojis. Jason Lee agreeing with what I said. Kid looked like he was pouting. Stephen Early says, I agree, pouting. Listen, this is not one of those things, I don't say this kind of stuff lightly, but body language for a quarterback matters. It matters more than any other position. I want my quarterback, if I'm Tennessee, being the guy helping other people up, not being the guy that has to be peeled off the ground by the opposing quarterback for South Carolina.
And that's fine. And listen, in week one, when they were playing Georgia Tech and he was completely disconnected with what was going on, I was one that was all over him. I was like, this guy's got to be better. But I don't have a problem with it if you're going to put all your emotion on the line and put everything on it. This first start is your Super Bowl. If he wants to pout for a minute, I'm telling you, I love the show of emotion from him. I think Tennessee needs more of this.
Cliff Nelson's right. That does not count as a leadership rep. That does not go down as a leadership rep.
You got to be on 2 feet for leadership rep.
That's not a physical rep. It's not a leadership rep. It's more of a, I don't even know. Yeah. Maurice Carter, the other side of this is, dang, B, you're cold, man. It's lights out with you. Ha ha. No, I'm not trying to be cold or all that negative. I just don't like that for my quarterback. If it's somebody else, I might accept it a little bit more. I need my quarterback to show some leadership.
Right, and I understand that angle looking at it. You want your quarterback to be the leader. You want him to be in the face. You want him to always have like good posture and be up and talking to everybody. I think it's just this specific scenario for me where this is his first start. Everybody questioned what was going on with Quentin Dorby last week. Very emotional week. Obviously, they're thinking that they've got to know that Butch Jones' job's on the line with some of these games that are happening. And just didn't feel like he got it done. I think this is the one specific scenario where I'm okay with what he did. Daniel
Robbins says true sportsmanship. That's a Vols fan giving credit to the South Carolina guy there, so we'll take that. By the way, in the comment section, you also got some people laughing about the next subject we're going to get to, item number 7, our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10. Before we talk to Alex Hickey about the game between LSU and Auburn, let's talk about a pretty unfortunate decision as it looks now for Auburn. Auburn's up big in this game, and the Auburn mascot, thinking he's really cute and funny, he decides to dress up like the Troy Trojan. We'll show you the screen grab here. Pick 6 Previews is the site that kind of came up with this. Here's the Auburn mascot dressed up like the Troy mascot. Many of you will remember that LSU lost to Troy earlier in the season. Well, after that, Auburn blows the big lead and loses the game. And this is not just like sports talk fodder. It makes the game worse, right? Yes, I mean, the Auburn mascot, if Malzahn's in the hot seat, this mascot's got to be in the hot seat.
Yeah, and I don't know at what point during the game this picture was taken, but you have to think that mascot probably saw, okay, we're up 20-0, LSU's not very good. I can probably trot this out there, and I might not get a good reaction from it, obviously being down in Death Valley, but I think I'll get some kind of reaction, and obviously Auburn will go on and win the game. Didn't happen. Auburn somehow squanders this game away. And if you'd have told me last week that LSU would have had more offensive yards than Auburn was going to in this game, I'd have laughed square in your face. I mean, I've been all about Danny Etling and LSU for a long time, but I cannot believe what we saw. And it's just an unfortunate series of events for that Auburn mascot.
Yeah, we'll get some of the comments here. Matt D says, y'all can say they blew a lead, but LSU shut down Auburn's offense. That's true. Elder R.O.
A little bit of both to me. A little bit of both.
He's laughing. He says Auburn, and that's what he says in the comment section. And this is one of those things where when you add this to the fact that Auburn had the big lead and essentially almost acted going into the game like it was just sort of due to kind of break the streak, had not won in Death Valley since 1999. This is one of those things where it is an embarrassing day for Auburn, embarrassing on a lot of fronts here, and I think the Auburn mascot kind of plays into that a little bit.
I listen, and I have to go back to the Les Miles quote that he had a few years ago. Death Valley is where dreams go to die, and that dream went to die if you're Auburn. And I have to agree with you. And we laughed all week last week about Nick Saban talking about rat poison, how these players start feeling themselves. Some things never change, and you have to have a team that is focused, and that's always been my issue with Gus Malzahn. And it showed up somewhere in the middle of the second quarter with some of the offensive line injuries. This team just felt like, we're going to run the ball down their throat. Jared Stidham's just going to throw it all over the field, and we'll be able to win this game. We're already up by 20 points. And it just went south so fast. And somehow Dave Aranda found a defense, found guys to go out there and cover them. I love some of the leadership that we saw from LSU on the defensive side of the ball, where really some of their older players are really taking the younger players under their wings, and it started to show up this week. And it really did. I thought they had a very good game plan in the second half from that LSU defensive side of the ball.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk some more about the game. Let's check in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Say hello to Alex Hickey, who covers the LSU Tigers for SECCountry.com. And, Alex, it was a wild day for sure on a lot of number of fronts. LSU comes back from the big deficit and really turns this game around. But now all of a sudden, it looks like a season for LSU that's been turned around by Ed Orgeron and the Dave Aranda and Matt Canada. Exactly how is it that LSU is playing so much better football over the course of the last couple of weeks?
It's funny that this season again comes down to, provided everything works out next week, it's going to again come down to an Alabama-LSU game on November 5th. And I don't think anybody saw that coming 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, but things just always manage to work out this way. It's interesting that everybody I've talked to, and they really brought it up today, the credit that they give is to a former player, linebacker Duke Riley, who's a rookie with the Falcons right now. He came the week before the Florida game and gave a pep talk to the team after practice, although I don't know if I would call it a pep talk per se, because he was calling people out. And coming from him, it seemed to resonate maybe more than what the coaches had to say, because they consider him kind of a brother in arms, and he was the leader of last year's team. And for basically Duke Riley to say, "I'm disappointed in you guys," really opened their eyes. So it is crazy how a guy like that can still have an impact here, but that's what these guys credit towards sort of basically making the light switch flip back on, and this team got back to playing LSU football as most people recognize it.
I think one of the biggest stories in college football a couple of weeks ago was that series of meetings that took place. Orgeron meeting with his players. Joe Oliva, the athletic director, involved in some of that. There was a players-only meeting. There was a meeting, I guess, between the AD and the coaching staff after maybe some public criticism of Matt Canada from Ed Orgeron. At the time, it sort of seemed like Orgeron was a coach out of control, that he wasn't managing the day-to-day operations of LSU as well as he could. Has that perception changed now because of these last two really big wins over Florida and Auburn?
Yeah, I think it's not just the wins. It's these meetings helped get those wins by getting everything more organized, making sure everybody was on the same page. I guess that sort of got derailed a little bit, and I'm not entirely sure how it ended up getting that way. That's sort of a post-mortem. We'll have to look back at it when the season is over, but yeah, all those meetings got everybody on the same page, and it feels like this program is sort of getting back where it thought it would be heading into the season. And I know this was a big weekend for recruits visiting Tiger Stadium, so that had to be encouraging for the future guys, the guys they want to get here, to see what they saw.
Yeah, you talk about Ed Orgeron's reputation. Obviously, another guy that had a new job this year was Matt Canada. I want to talk about his offense for a little bit too, because I think this is the best they've looked all year. Obviously, some things starting to come around for them, and also Danny Etling being at the forefront of that. Is this the best game you've seen at LSU for Danny Etling as the quarterback?
He had some good ones last year against some, nondescript defenses. As I recall, he tore up Mizzou pretty good. So, I mean, he's had more productive passing games, but it's definitely one of his better games as far as, throwing the ball. He's had the leadership intangibles, I think, every game he's out there, but, it's a question of how will Danny pass today. Against Florida, it wasn't great, but that's when we saw him doing, basically things you would expect from a running quarterback, and that really galvanized the team. I thought he exposed Auburn's secondary. I don't think that is a very good pass defense unless they get to the quarterback. I thought that especially DJ Chark, Danny connected with him time after time, and it was a great day for Danny and a better day for DJ. And I think they kind of exposed Auburn a little bit.
Alex, great talking to you here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. We'll look forward to speaking to you more on our program in the near future. All of a sudden, this stretch run for LSU could be really interesting, and we'll enjoy reading a lot of what you have to write about that.
Yeah, didn't see this one coming, but that's the SEC.
Good stuff there from Alex Hickey, who covers the LSU Tigers for SECCountry.com. And I actually heard a really interesting tidbit from someone over the weekend that I trust, that the oversight of Joe Oliva to Ed Orgeron extended past more than just the one meeting that we all heard about. There was a lot more involvement with Oliva and Orgeron than that, which sort of leads to an unorthodox situation. Athletic director involved, maybe too involved, head coach maybe not in control enough, but somehow, some way, at least for now, it's all been kind of worked out.
Yeah, and I can't say that I blame Joe Oliva if that's what's going on there. I mean, you're talking about a guy whose job is on the line with Ed Orgeron. So if he has to stick his head in a couple of meetings, call Ed Orgeron in on a daily basis, whatever he has to do, I would think he's trying to do that to save his job. And for them, as much as we questioned that meeting and said, I've never seen anything like this, it has worked the last couple of weeks.
All right, that's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T's SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Make sure you switch to AT&T Wireless and DirecTV. You can stay connected all season long. In the comment section a moment ago, Joel Anthony Dean said, hey, can we talk about Florida and whether or not they're going to go to a bowl this year? You know what, Joel? We can talk about that right now. We'll make it the subject of item number 8 here in our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10, and Florida does lose to Texas A&M on Saturday. Not a good performance for the Gators at all. Really bad offensively here, and Texas A&M game that I think you and I both thought this would be tough for the Gators, and for Florida, all of a sudden, this is a season kind of reeling out of control here with the bye week coming, and then the trip to Jacksonville to play Georgia 2 weeks from now. A lot of internet talk about McElwain here coming off the loss. I'll give you one example of that from Clay Travis on Twitter, not because that Travis is the end-all be-all, but it kind of encapsulates what a lot of other people are saying, that Jim McElwain's luck is officially over. We'll remember some close calls for Florida earlier in the season. Travis goes on to say Gators could be 1-5. That Georgia game is going to be ugly. Well, that remains to be seen how Florida will match up with Georgia. But in terms of Clay's tweet here as an example of what people are saying on the internet, is Jim McElwain also now in trouble after giving up a game that Florida fans maybe thought he should win?
Well, I think he's as in trouble as he has been. I still think obviously he's going to make it through the year. He's going to have the opportunity to coach this team next year. I thought you saw probably an improved defense this weekend, which I think is kind of crazy to point to.
Yeah.
With all the questions we've had defensively for Florida, they absolutely showed up. I mean, Kellen Mond's 8 of 24 in the game. There's 83 rushing yards for Texas A&M. Where really you thought they'd be able to take control of this game, specifically with Kadarius Toney out, with some of the other players out on the Florida side of the ball. I think the criticism for me for Jim McElwain has and it will always be the same. When is he going to find the quarterback? Because Felipe Frank seemingly not the answer. 2 interceptions this past week and just not a good look. He didn't look like he's in rhythm. And this offense, since Jim McElwain's been there, I guess before that, since Will Muschamp's been there, has not looked like it's been in rhythm. And so I think the same questions are being asked to him that have been in the past. Obviously, this one's a black eye, but I still think he's going to be able to bounce back from that and still look good going down the stretch.
As you might imagine, some of the Georgia fans starting to come out of the woodworks here a little bit on Florida. Loon Davidson says, talk about UGA, national champs. Gators will get killed by UGA. Mark Chambers says, Florida orange juiced. Michael Moss pointing out there now unranked. Joel Anthony Dean says any bowl is looking good for the Gators now. Dedrick Frazier says ready for some Gator soup in 2 weeks. On and on we go. Terry Crews suggesting Jim McElwain could end up with the Land Sharks in Ole Miss. We kind of get where that joke is coming from Terry, but overall I agree with your point. McElwain's not going anywhere at Florida, but it speaks to how important I think the 2018 season becomes. And if you'll remember, not to say I told you so because I'm wrong about plenty, but back during the offseason, I said by the end of this year, I thought McElwain would be on the hot seat. I thought Florida was going 7-5, and I think they still might. I think they've got more losses coming before the season's all said and done. Now, I think McElwain's got a really good recruiting class that he's starting to build for 2018, but he needs that class. He needs Matt Corral to be the quarterback in the future. He needs Corral to have some coattails. Bring in, Jacob Copeland. Bring in some other big names. He needs to have a much more talented roster in 2018 than he currently has because Florida's problems of the moment are because of McElwain's recruiting failures in 2015 and 2016, and I can't be convinced of anything else.
Well, more so than Matt Corral and Jacob Copeland, I think that what Jim McElwain needs is to find an offensive line that fits his style. I think that he really thought they would be turning a corner on the offensive line this year, and it's not like any offensive line he's ever had. They're a little bit better. But when I go back to Jim McElwain's days with me and that offensive line that he had at Alabama that he was probably having his best years, national championships, strong offensive line. You could run the game, and you didn't ask the quarterback to go win the game. He's had to ask the quarterback to win the game here recently. I think that's why they've looked bad. Felipe Franks is not ready for that. So somewhere between this year and next year, he's got to develop that offensive line. They've got to get a lot better up front.
Hashim Spike says Florida should have known what would have happened when they wore those pukalicious uniforms. Those things were terrible. And somebody on Twitter brought up a great point. I don't know if we have the uniforms that we can show. We may not just want to show them again after as bad as they were. But I'm colorblind. Those uniforms blend in with the grass. You cannot see that the Florida team's even on the field.
Well, it's also an interesting point because I think it was Boise that got banned from wearing blue at home because it merged in with their blue turf. I wonder if that's not some kind of rules violation going forward. But I don't think they'll ever bust them out again, so I don't think it'll ever be a talking point. But it's definitely something to think about. And I'm with you. I'm a little bit colorblind as well, red-green. It was tough to see them. And it just, oh, man, it was a bad look. I couldn't get over it.
Florida looked invisible. Another chance winning the SEC East have totally disappeared as well. So it all kind of works out.
I wait for it. I wait for that little tidbit from BA over here every day. It's going to come at some point.
This is a Florida team right now, all kidding aside, they got a lot of problems.
It's a debacle right now down there. And I have to give them a little bit more credit because, honestly, when they announced the injuries last week to Tyree Cleveland and the quarterback there in the Wildcat, that I thought that they would be blown out. I thought that this would be a 14-point victory for Texas A&M. The defense definitely showed up and did their part to keep Texas A&M under wrap. 8 for 24 for Kellen Mond after the performance he had against Alabama's defense. I didn't think there was any chance that he'd be any better than that.
Bo Molinari is yelling at us, so Bo, you're right. Let's give some credit to the winner here, Texas A&M, on that side of things for a moment. This is a team that's looking pretty good. I absolutely think this could be a 9-3 football team by the end of the season.
Well, that's what's crazy about it is I want to give all the credit to Texas A&M, but you start looking at their stats and you start looking how they won the game. They didn't look that great either. It was kind of an ugly win for them when you talk about them matching up with the Florida Gators. Like I said, I thought that they would take over the game and win by 2 touchdowns. 14 points, I thought. They get the field goal right at the end of the game, and it ends up looking bad. But if they don't get that field goal, or if that field goal kicker somehow hooks that kick, we're asking a lot of questions about Kellen Mond right now. After the stats that he put up, it just wasn't very good.
Bo Molinari also says we were talking about Kevin Sumlin's hot seat. Listen, you can go back and watch all the archives. They're saved there on the SEC Country Facebook page. I don't necessarily defend Sumlin as a coach individually, but I said all along this team may be good enough to help him save his job, and I said that even after the UCLA game for what it's worth.
Well, and I kind of put the onus on John Chavis. What is John Chavis going to bring to the table? I don't think there's ever been a question about what Kevin Sumlin is offensively. You feel like you're going to get that. My question is John Chavis and all the money he's making, what is he making, $1.2 million as a defensive coordinator down there? Is what he's doing on the defensive side of the ball going to be enough? And I think you've seen that in the last couple of weeks. That they've been able to kind of show up on that side of the ball, and they're getting a little bit better under him.
I have a hot take on Jon Gruden. Can we get to that in just a moment? Let me squeeze in a couple more quick comments before we do. Cliff Nelson asked a really good question. Can Jim McElwain survive long enough for Corral to even be a factor? Corral's going to start for Florida next season. At that point in time, McElwain's either going to be saved by a freshman quarterback. I'm not talking about having the greatest year of all time, but you can watch the highlights here. This is a young man that's got quite an impressive skill set, way better than any quarterback that Florida signed since Tim Tebow. I mean, it's not even close. Even Jeff Driscoll was good coming out of high school. The Corral skill set's even better than that. I'm not telling you he's going to be lights out as a freshman, but can he be good enough to make Florida fans feel optimistic? That's going to be the thing that one way or another determines McElwain's future at Florida.
And I know we see this differently. I don't know what we're pointing to that tells me that Matt Corral will definitely be on the field next year. I don't think Jim McElwain has a track record yet to say, you know what, we'll just plug in a guy that's coming straight out of high school. Because I think they're starting at ground zero if they do that. All the growing pains you feel like you've had with Felipe Franks and this being a wasted season, you're throwing all that down the trash can if you're putting a true freshman on the field next year. I don't think that's what Jim McElwain wants to do. So I don't know that he'll be enough to really save Jim McElwain's job at any point. I think they've got to lean on that running game and the offensive line in this offense if that's what they want to happen.
All right, let's do item number 9 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So the Twitter forces were out in full force on Saturday with photos of Jon Gruden in Knoxville. Yeah. We'll show you some examples of this. Gruden seen at the game, seen around Knoxville. There he is at a local restaurant. The Groomers, yeah. I love that. At Vol Rumor Mill on Twitter. There's another picture of him there in the restaurant. I believe we have a picture of him in the stadium.
Doesn't he represent Corona? Doesn't Jon Gruden do the Corona commercials?
Oh, does he? Is he get the wrong beer?
Oh, no. Oh,
wait, man, is that a beer bottle or is that like one of those fancy water bottles?
I don't know. It might be that too.
It looks like a Lowenbrow or something like that.
I don't know what that is.
You've heard of Lowenbrow?
No, man.
It's like an old, foreign beer from the 80s. I think we also have do we have a picture of him sitting in the stands, actually? But he was at the game. You see the photos kind of showing up from there on that. Here's my point on this. I think it is a cheap move on the part of Jon Gruden to be at this game if he's not interested in coaching Tennessee. It's unfair to Butch Jones, which I don't really care about. I mean, I don't care one way or another.
I thought that's the way you were going.
No, listen, I don't care one way or another about Butch Jones. But a lot of Vols fans do want Jon Gruden. And they are going to get their hopes up about Gruden being at the game. He knows that. He's cultivating this attention by being there. He's certainly not doing anything to kind of ramp it down. This is a dirty move on Gruden's part if he's not interested in this job. And if come to find out he's not interested in this job, I'll never look at him the same way again. He's a relatively benign figure to me right now. Not a terrible broadcaster, kind of a big personality. I'm fine with him. There's a chance he might be a good college coach. I'm not quite sure I know one way or another, but he's a jerk in my mind forever. If he goes to this game and then does not at least entertain the Tennessee offer when it comes, because I believe it is coming.
I agree.
If he doesn't at least entertain it, then he's done the people of Knoxville wrong.
Well, and maybe the people in the comment section have a little bit more background. I think does his son go to Tennessee? There's some kind of connection where he knows somebody that goes there.
The son does go to Tennessee.
But I agree with you. The timing is all off on this. And I don't know that I'm so much worried about what it's going to look like for the Tennessee fans.
And it's the Monday night game in Nashville tonight, too, right?
Yeah,
so it's close enough.
Yeah, and I don't know that I'm so much worried about, this is kind of him leading Tennessee fans in the wrong direction. I thought it was kind of cheap on his part for Butch Jones, honestly. And I know that, you said you don't care about Butch Jones and his feelings or whatever. I thought it was a cheap part from one coach to another. By the way, he has, he runs the organization called the Fired Football Coaches of America.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and so he wears those hats.
He's about to have one more. Maybe he's got another dude paying member. He's there.
He needs to show up and check everybody out.
You know what? Pass the hat. Here's your application.
FFCA that he always wears across his hat. And so if that's what you're going to hang your hat on, literally, I thought it was kind of a bad move.
But listen, if you're in the coaching fraternity, maybe you care about how Gruden treats Butch Jones. I'm not in the coaching fraternity. True. I'm not one of these guys that says all coaches have to stick up for each other. If Gruden wants the Tennessee job, it's a great way to show it. Be there in Knoxville, start to get that attention, send that message to John Curry about how serious you are. If you want the job, I got no problem with you doing that. You want to cut in on the dance floor, this is your chance to do that. But if you don't want the job and you're doing this, then you're just an attention-seeking, you know what.
Well, I'll even go one step further than that. I don't know why Tennessee fans would want Jon Gruden to have that. I understand he's a big name, but first of all, I think he's making $6.5 million on Monday Night Football to do that. You're going to have to come with some serious pocketbook if you're going to want to get him out of that profession where he's working one day a week calling football games, and all of a sudden you want him to show up and enter in recruiting. I don't think he wants to recruit. I don't have any track record that shows me he's a good college football coach. Yeah. I think Tennessee's got to make a better hire than that. I know the rumors have been out there, and Paul Feinemann's been talking about it. I'm just telling you, I don't think the guy will work out. I think Tennessee fans need a little bit better than that.
I think they could do better than that, but I respect the fact that a lot of Tennessee fans do want him. That at least is something that I'm going to respect. And I think that Jon Gruden ought to show respect to the people who feel that way about him if he's indeed not interested in the job. Let me do item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Georgia gets an easy win over Missouri. A little bit of a challenge in the first half. The Missouri passing attack kind of challenged the Georgia secondary, but the Dogs withstood that, went on to an easy win in the second half. But in the first half, when Missouri was striking, the Georgia offense was striking back, overcoming some mistakes and some sloppiness to hit its own big plays down the field. And after the game, Kirby Smart said, you know what? He's pretty proud of what the Georgia offense was able to do, despite the fact that it wasn't a perfect game for his team overall.
I thought that was probably the sloppiest game as far as organizationally and the things we got to do to be a great team. But I don't want to diminish what that offense just went out there and did, because they executed well, they ran the ball well, they threw and caught the ball well. Jake made good decisions. I thought they grew up from a passing standpoint.
I'm going to tell you right now, if all you saw was the final score, if all you saw in the first half was it was 21-21 at one point, you're missing the point here. I think Georgia as a team took a step forward on Saturday. They got better offensively, and for a lot of these teams that played Georgia, Florida in 2 weeks, Auburn after that, South Carolina, Kentucky in the mix there as well, the Georgia team you're about to play is going to be even better than the one that you saw in the late part of September, early part of October. Georgia's getting better here.
I agree. I think their offense definitely took a step. And what was the talking point we had last week? Is Jake Fromm a game manager? Is this somebody that's going to be able to take the next step when he needs to win a game with his arm? Well, guess what? At this point in the second half, he needed to win it with his arm, and he throws for 326 yards. He's 18 of 26. I agree with you, and I'm not just trying to beat the Georgia bandwagon here or talk good about Georgia. I think they took a step forward. Nick Chubb looks good. DeAndre Swift, as explosive as they come coming out of the backfield. Yeah. If you can get the ball in his hands, you need to do it. But Jake Fromm, some of the accuracy he had on the intermediate throws and the downfield throws, definite step forward in my book. I think this is the best game that he's played.
I think you may be right. Dwayne Tick Coleman, against a bad defense, but still a good performance by Fromm. Dwayne Tick Coleman in the comment section says, Georgia's better than Alabama. Go Tigers, though. So that's an LSU fan who likes Georgia more than Alabama. I'm not quite ready to say that about Georgia. I will tell you this, though. Georgia is closer to Alabama in a lot of respects than a lot of people realize.
Oh, I think so, too. And it's been our talking point on the show for quite some time that both of these programs, extremely good football teams. I don't know that any of them have a real weakness. I think there's ways to beat these teams. You're going to have to stop the run both ways. I think that Kirby Smart and Nick Saban understand each other in a way that probably no two other coaches do in college football. So I think if it comes to that point and they're both in Atlanta at the end of the season, it's going to be a lot of fun for me and you.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have a great time here on AT&T's SEC Country Live. By the way, speaking of AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live, AT&T Entertainment Your Way. Make sure you switch to AT&T Wireless Direct TV. You can stay connected all throughout the football season. Now, I have a lot of questions about our champion of life to close out our show. We'll get to that in a moment. Before that, though, speaking of AT&T, let's do our AT&T look ahead with our first look at the college football slate for this upcoming Saturday. We talked a moment ago about the third Saturday in October showdown between Tennessee and Alabama. How about Idaho, Missouri? I wouldn't watch that with your eyes. Kentucky, Mississippi State. That's probably a better game than people realize. LSU, Ole Miss, Magnolia Bowl. Maybe lost a step, although Ole Miss didn't look bad on Saturday. Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, that may be a pretty good spot for the Rebels right there.
Yeah, I think
that may be a pretty good spot for the Rebels. I'm calling that one right now.
Yeah, that's a pretty good spot.
Ole Miss plus whatever points they're getting. I'm calling that right now.
And by the way, the Tennessee-Alabama game, 34.5-point spread is what I saw here. I mean, I can't even imagine that. A rivalry game, 34.5, and I think that's just crazy.
Auburn versus Arkansas. Does Arkansas have anything left?
I think they do. I think they did some good things. Obviously, Cole Kelly was playing last week, so it was tough for me to kind of get a read on where they are without Austin Allen being in the lineup. But they have some firepower to me. Brett Bielema, to me, though, has got to get his team to play at a higher level emotionally than he has here recently.
All right, let's close the show out the way we do every day. You know, Tennessee coach Butch Jones, at least while he still has a job, is always looking for champions of life. And here on AT&T's SEC Country Live, we're kind of doing the same thing here. I have a lot of questions about this. First of all, to the young people who do the show this every day, do y'all know John Stockton, Karl Malone? Do y'all remember? You remember John Stockton, Karl Malone? All right, so John Stockton, Karl Malone, the tandem are at the LSU game on Saturday. But take a look at this photo that was unearthed of them. They are both on flip phones. What is going on here with these two multimillionaires who are on flip phones?
I know that the fans that are watching this right now are going to love this reaction from me. My first thought was, are these burner phones? Like, is this a reaction to Hugh Freeze? Is this a reaction to Hugh Freeze where they're like, you know what? Let me get one of those Go phones off the rack at Walmart just so I can't be.
I mean,
that's my first thought when I saw that picture.
It'd be a much better explanation and a lot cooler if it was a burner phone. But these are not guys that have burner phones.
I know. I was trying to explain, like, these are two guys that like are always going to be mentioned in the same breath, Karl Malone and John Stockton. For them both to have flip phones, I was like, what are the odds of that?
I mean, you're old enough to know Stockton.
Yeah,
Malone,
absolutely.
Right?
I mean, that's some of my earliest memories.
Yeah,
watching them and playing the Bulls in the finals.
This is a great NBA tandem, and I guess there's the family relationship. Was it KJ Malone?
KJ Malone, left tackle for LSU.
Yeah. So that's why they're at the game. But that's why Karl Malone's there. What does John Stockton go everywhere? What is this, like Bo and Luke Duke? They're riding the same car together.
Scotty and Michael.
But they're not always together.
They're together enough. I think that Scotty would go watch Michael Jordan's son play.
The flip phone thing is wild. All right, that's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. Thanks for being with us. We're back again 3 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow for another episode of AT&T SEC Country Live. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Share the show with your friends on Facebook, and we'll see you then. Y'all have a great day.